Hello, everybody. Some major breaking news happened last night. Hunter Biden, the son of President Joe Biden, has been indicted on 9 separate charges on failure to pay over $1 million in taxes in the state of California, but delivered by a federal grand jury. Now, you'll have to recall that these charges were brought forward after a plea deal between Hunter Biden and the government collapsed, specifically because IRS whistleblowers came forward to allege that there was political pressure involved in the IRS investigation into Hunter Biden, and they were not allowed to explore his foreign business dealings and the possible connections to the current president of the United States. After the basically falling apart of the plea deal in that case, in which the judge alleged that it was too sweetheart, the government has now decided to go through with its prosecution effectively after having its hand forced. And the details in some of this is exactly why Hunter wanted to plea, was to make sure that none of this came out, because it is just stunning in terms of its corruption, in terms of his own personal conduct. And look, we will leave the personal conduct, I think, for a little bit later in this video. But we're going to start with what we really need to know about his foreign business dealings. So let's go and put the indictment up there on the screen. And I'm going to go ahead and read directly from this. Quote, "The defendant engaged in a 4-year scheme to not pay at least $1.4 million in self-assessed federal taxes that he owed for the tax years 2016 through 2019, from in or about January of 2017 through in or about October 15th, 2020, and to evade the assessment of taxes for the tax year 2018, he filed false returns in or about February of 2020. So there are 3 felonies that have been charged, 6 misdemeanors from failure to pay taxes and failure to file taxes. The indictment also lays out something very important around these business dealings. Hunter Biden hauled in more than $7 million in total gross income from foreign business dealings involving Ukrainian, Romanian, and Chinese entities. Quote, "At times relevant to this indictment, the defendant served on the board of a Ukrainian industrial conglomerate and a Chinese private equity fund. He negotiated and executed contracts and agreements for business and legal services that paid millions of dollars of compensation to him and or his domestic corporations." Now, the single most important piece of the indictment, I believe, is this. Let's go and put it up there on the screen. What you can see here very clearly is that Hunter Biden's salary from Burisma, the Ukrainian energy company of which he was put on the board of while President Obama was president, cut his salary in half just 2 months after Donald Trump took office. Let me read this. Quote, "In or around April of 2014, the defendant joined the board of the director of Burisma Holdings Limited Company, a Ukrainian industrial conglomerate. Burisma agreed to pay the defendant an annual salary of approximately $1 million to be paid in monthly disbursements. In March of 2017, Burisma reduced his compensation to approximately $500,000 a year, and he continued to serve on the board of directors until or around April of 2019. As a result, he received a total of $1 million in 2016, which then dropped to $600,000 in 2017 and continued to drop between 2018 and 2019. So very clearly, the vast majority of his income from the Ukrainian energy company came while Joe Biden was vice president of the United States and who was in charge of the Ukraine portfolio. Now, furthermore, and this gets to Hunter's own personal conduct, the Department of Justice was not sparing whatsoever in detailing the vast sums of money that Hunter spent on illicit activities. So I'm going to go ahead and read some of this. And, if you got kids in the room or anything like that, I would recommend that you take them out. So these are the descriptions of the things that Hunter Biden, according to the IRS and the Department of Justice, did instead of paying his taxes. He withdrew a grand total of $1.6 million in cash, $1.6 million between 2016 and 2019. For payments to various women, he spent $683,000 in that same period. For clothing and accessories, $400,000. For what is described as, quote, adult entertainment, it's $188,000. Now, I have a question too, which is why is adult entertainment not lumped together with various women? And let's also be very clear here that the payments to quote various women were not necessarily girlfriends or any of that. They're described in the indictment as escorts and sex workers, all basically across the world, including and in Europe. There also was a very important point that the IRS and the Department of Justice sought to clarify that they're not prosecuting Hunter for being a degenerate drug addict. They are also highlighting, quote, even after he became sober, they say well after he regained his sobriety and when he finally did file his outstanding taxes, quote, the defendant did not direct any payments towards his tax liabilities for each of those years. At the same time, the defendant spent large sums to maintain his lifestyle from January through October 15th of 2020. He spent, as I already showed you, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It appears almost close to $1 million if you combine the two, $750,000 on, quote, various women and adult entertainment. So the reason why, again, all of this is important is it opens up a lot of different exploration for corruption. Who do you know that withdraws $1.6 million in cash? 1.6 million. Remember this, folks. If you withdraw more than $10,000, that is supposed to trigger an automatic notification to the FBI, to the Treasury Department, and the bank is supposed to report you. This is something that Jeffrey Epstein also did in order to cover a lot of the tracks about some of the things he were doing. Now, with Hunter, it appears the DOJ had enough visibility in his finances. They can even itemize the separate amounts that he spent on hookers and on quote adult entertainment, as well as his lavish lifestyle, including clothing, accessories, vehicles, all these other things. So what did the remainder of the $1.6 million in cash do? Who do you know, again, who conducts business that way? Cash under the table is the way that all illicit transactions are done. Now, presumably some of that, and maybe even a large portion of that, was used to buy drugs, but you also don't know who he gave it to. So that's one separate avenue. The second thing on Burisma, and this is obviously verifiable from the DOJ tax indictment, it's very clear that they stopped paying him as much whenever he was no longer as useful to them. And I mean, that in and of itself is outrageous because it demonstrates why he was put on the board in the first place and the extent to now which many of his business partners have testified to allegedly Joe Biden at least knowing something or something involved with these. Now, the big question for the investigation is, did he receive any cash under the table? We have not even really gone into James Biden, the president of Joe Biden, who has long traded off of his name. And I recommend Ben Schreckinger's book called The Bidens that specifically goes into all of the transactions over the decades of President Joe Biden's career that he and Hunter have taken advantage of the Biden last name to the tune of tens of millions. And look, I'll just finally and take a step back and just I want everybody to think about this. If you were lucky enough to make $7 million, to accrue $1.4 million in taxable income, which is a crazy sum when we all lean back and we think about it, and you fail to pay your taxes 4 years in a row, would you have made it all the way to 2023 without being thrown in jail by the IRS and the DOJ? Getting your sweetheart deal that the judge has to come in and say, no, this is too sweetheart, and forcing the government to prosecute you. The special treatment that this man got from his drug addiction to the ability to trade off of his father's last name because of his drug addiction, to avoid jail time, to avoid gun charges, to avoid tax prosecution, and all of that until it becomes a central priority for the opposing party when your father is president. It's just truly disgusting, and it shows you what these people get away with. How many more Hunter Bidens are walking around out there? I guess all people who have made, or at least a lot of the people who have made $7-10 million from foreign governments who are paying them directly for influence. So that's the summary of the charges as best as I can make them. I encourage everybody to go and read these raw documents for themselves. As you said, I barely even scratched the surface. Some of the other stuff in there is equally jaw-dropping. And we'll see you all later.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.